The last one-to-one interactions to explore are modifying and removing one-to-one relationships. You've already seen some scenarios where that happens as a side effect of adding a relationship, but now we'll focus on doing this intentionally. If you simply want to move a dependent to a different principal, say for example you attached a cover to the wrong book and you need to move it to the right book, you can handle this as we've seen with one-to-many, and there's a few options. You can change the cover's book ID, or if you have the new book in memory, you can change the cover's book property. If you have both books in memory, along with a cover, meaning that the change tracker is aware of all three, setting the cover property of the new book to the cover that you're moving will trigger EF Core to update the cover's book ID. But again, there are some considerations, and it might be a little easier to refer to these books as the wrong book and the right book. So if the right book already has a cover assigned, you'll run into the same problems I just showed you when adding. If everything is being tracked, then EF Core is going to delete that cover that was already attached to the right book before it can tie your target cover to it. And that might not be something you want to be surprised by. And if the books aren't being tracked, and EF Core is just sending an update command for the cover to change its book ID, that means there's already a row in the covers table with that book ID. And when the database tries to execute EF Core's command, again, you're going to break the unique foreign key constraint because there can only be one cover with that book ID, and the database will return an error. Again, that goes back to making sure you understand the behavior of your tools and writing your application to protect you from those kinds of side effects. Finally, if you want to just remove the relationship between a book and cover, in our model where a cover cannot just be floating around without a book, the simplest path is just to delete the cover. Another simple way is if you have a graph of the book and the cover, and you set the cover property to null, then EF Core will know to send a delete command for the cover. There are so many ways to achieve these various tasks: connecting, moving, creating, and removing related data. And I'm not showing you every single possibility because there's just not enough time. But you also need to consider when the cover is required, rather than it being optional, as it is using the defaults, or when we're in disconnected scenarios like websites. The reason I'm aware of them is because I try them out, and I use the change tracker and the logs in the database to learn what the effects are of different patterns. And when a new version of EF Core comes out, I try them again. And I certainly can't keep them all in my head, so sometimes I'll test them again to be sure I'm anticipating the behavior correctly. And you now have these tools and practices at your disposal to do the same. Relationships are complicated in life and in data. You may have been surprised at something that seems so simple, a one-to-one relationship, could come with so many things to consider. For example, that EF Core must be able to identify a principal and a dependent in a one-to-one relationship, or that there are quite a few ways to map this relationship. And given that you can add configurations, even more possibilities if you're not depending on conventions. But the simplest mapping for EF Core to recognize a one-to-one is the one with the most clues: navigation properties on both ends, and a foreign key in the dependent or child class. And that mapping comes along with some defaults. The child is always optional, the parent is required, and if you delete the parent, a cascade delete will also delete the child record. Fortunately, querying across the one-to-one uses the same patterns and syntax that you've already learned. But it was also fun to finally have a thread of relationships all the way from author to artist, so we could write a multi-level query to bring back a complete relationship. When it was time to join objects in one-to-one relationships, you learned that you really need to protect yourself against accidentally breaking the unique foreign key constraint, where you might try to join a cover to a book that already has a cover. And if EF Core is tracking all of the relevant objects, it will delete a cover to make way for a new one. And I shared with you my guidance based on a lot of experience about how important it is to know your tools and understand their behaviors. There are a lot of variations for the mappings and the behaviors, and my best advice is to try them out and understand what the behaviors are before implementing them in your applications. There have been a lot of tasks along the way that I've said can be more easily solved by just using raw SQL or a stored procedure in the database. Finally, in the next module, you'll learn about EF Core's capability of allowing you to use views, stored procedures, and other database objects that might already be in your database, or that you might want to create to solve some persistence problems more easily. Here again are some resources that I've mentioned in this module, or that I think you might find relevant. I'm Julie Lerman, and thanks again for watching Entity Framework Core Fundamentals.